Second hour of this 3-hour Buffalo Football Monday edition of One Bills Live. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, and happy to welcome in now Bills radio color analyst and former center Eric Wood, joining us with his thoughts on last night's remarkable comeback performance as the Bills outscore the Ravens 22-6 in the fourth quarter, including 16 unanswered, to win by a single point, as 41-year-old Matt Prater, Eric, provides the 40th and 41st point in the win.
Yeah, how about that? Signed this week, just getting to know his teammates, and then comes in and hits the game winner. Now, what did we say on the broadcast? I think he's hit 23 of them throughout his career. It was interesting afterwards. He said, I was just trying to hit a clean ball. And that's a guy who's been there before, but you know, when you're doing it and trying to earn the respect from your teammates, you can have some added pressure, obviously, in that situation. And heck, that thing almost got blocked.
Yeah, Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah, and so people are saying, man, why didn't they block him? Well, I'm assuming that they set him up for that. And Steve, you know a lot more about this kind of stuff than I do, but you set that up throughout the game by, you know, running into the tight end or the wing, and then when it comes to it, you jump over their legs and try and go make the block when it really counts. And Kyle Hamilton almost got that one, but the Bills sneak one out. And we have smiles on our faces today, and it sure didn't look like it when Chris was reading a bunch of stats about the last time the Bills lost in Highmark and last time they gave up 40 points and whatnot.
Yeah, it was certainly we're instituting a fine system here on the show now. You got to donate $17 to O'Shea if you left early, and
then all is forgiven.
And then it's all forgiven. But that's it. It really was an unlikely win as you get down to the end of it, where a team as good as the Baltimore Ravens letting a Bills team off the hook the way they did. I get the thing too, where you know this Matt Prater, who is kind of the hero of the day after hitting that kick. Smart move by Brandon Beane. We talked about this on Post Game Live. Eric, Prater, that's not going to be too big for him. The guy's got an 18-year career. As you say, he's got 23 other game-winning kicks. If you're going to plug a guy in, do somebody who's done it a gazillion times, right? A 41-year-old kicker who's still got some life in his leg. Just step out and plug him in. I thought that was, in retrospect, that's exactly the kind of guy you should have signed. Not some young guy with a huge leg who can really pound it. No, get somebody who's going to give you exactly what you need.
No, I'm with you 100%. Get the guy that can get you to the point where Tyler Bass comes back. He's your kicker of the future, your young guy that, has proven he can do it in Bill Stadium. But you get a guy that the moment's not too big for him. Now, these new kickoff rules and all of that, this is something he's going to adjust to. And, there were some times yesterday where the ball's landing around the 10. He put one in the end zone that gave him the ball at the 35, which the way both those teams were returning the football, it almost seemed like just give him the ball at the 35 and not risk getting it out the midfield at times yesterday. But it seems like both teams' coverage units kind of settled in at some point. But no, I think it's a great signing. It's a guy that you don't have to – you're not looking to develop him. You're not worried about him being too nervous out there. He's a guy that can step in and truly plug and play.
Right.
We expected the Baltimore offense to be a handful. It was. They still look very machine-like. Lamar played a very good game. Derrick Henry had 175 yards rushing. But they are the first NFL team, Eric, to rush for 235 yards, score 40 points, and lose out of the last 278 teams to do that. They're now 277-1. Harbaugh has a history of blowing double-digit leads. It's now up to 17 in his head coaching career, 8 of which have happened in just the last 3 seasons. What about it?
Yeah, I guess it's taking your foot off the gas because at some point it's not just a coincidence. It's not a coincidence when it happens that many times. So what's the change in your defensive philosophy, offensive philosophy? You got to look at that if you're the Baltimore Ravens. Now, did they get a little predictable at the end? Of course, all teams are when you're trying to run out the clock. You're trying to simply run the football in those situations. And when there wasn't the threat of the pass, the Bills were able to get up the field and make some plays and tackles for losses and forced fumbles and all that. And then defensively, they played Ben with don't break, but then when the Bills got past midfield, Josh had answers when they said, okay, now we're going to try and light you up. And, I don't know the exact answer for them other than the fact that it's become a trend and it's an issue for them. And look, if it never stops, it won't hurt my feelings.
Yeah, and there was a couple of things too, and of course Raven fans are feeling bitter about it today where, the Bills got a 1 second put on the clock right before halftime. That all of the official the calls on the field, the officials. The Bills also had some stuff go against them. What's your take on Keon Coleman getting pushed out of the back of the end zone, coming back in, reestablishing, catching that 2 point? And then the Bills were chasing those points all the way through the second half.
Yeah, I thought the breaks kind of went both ways.
Yeah.
Baltimore drops an early interception. There was a ticky-tack holding call on Christian Benford, and then probably one he didn't get called for later. The 2-point conversion attempt on the back shoulder throw to Keon Coleman, the dude's got him by his neck collar. He's yanking down the collar of his jersey. Like, I don't understand how you missed that one, but you're going to complain about some of the other ones. So, and then to me, if you're saying that Keon Coleman ran out of bounds on his own, that's one thing. He was obviously pushed out of bounds. So when he reestablishes his footing back there, it's either one of two things. It's either more than 5 yards down the field and it's illegal contact, or you're just going to say that he reestablishes himself. I don't understand. So it's either illegal contact, and for those watching along with us, you can see it. It's either illegal contact down the field where he's contacted the receiver past 5 yards down the field, and he shoved him out of bounds, and then he obviously reestablishes himself. And I don't know. I guess that's tough for them to maybe see in the moment, but maybe that's something that needs to be reviewed because that was a massive play in the game for the going against the Bills. And so I think the breaks kind of went both ways in this one. And, this is, kind of been the brand of ball for the Bills recently where it's, okay, how long can you play without making a mistake? In the playoff game, they had 3 turnovers. In this game, they just had 1. And then you got, 2 of the best players on the planet going toe-to-toe and, an old school duel. It was fun to watch, but the moments were bleak prior to the end. And, we all have this warm and fuzzy feeling today, one of the greatest games in Bills history. But there are some things that need to be addressed heading into this week, especially when you consider how well the Jets ran the football last week against the Steelers.
I've said this too, that when you get a ton of and there's a lot of them around the league, the Dallas Philly game was close. All these games were really close. Some of them weren't, but a lot of them were right down. Anytime you get a league where there's a ton of very close games, the officials will always come into the spotlight because they got to make calls. And those calls mean something.
They're magnified.
Yeah, I'll say this too. If Keon gets the 2-point right there, the Ravens may win that game because everything's different at the end. And they may need points, and all of a sudden they're still slinging it. If Keon goes in on the slant route at the end of the game and you give the ball back to Lamar with 42 seconds, all of a sudden, the Bills that's a movie the Bills have seen all too many times.
And 3 timeouts.
That's how close that game was. One call here or there, and the ripple effects of the early downs and the go for it's and the 2-point conversion misses and all that ripple effect goes all the way to the end of this game, and you get what we got.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about that ripple effect all the time on the broadcast. It's, the 3, Bills get to 2nd and 1 on their second possession. They run it 2 more straight times, get stuffed. Well, then that's a 3 and out where, the Bills hold the Ravens to a field goal, but it's a long first drive, 12, 13 plays maybe. And so then you give them the ball back right after a 3 and out, and boom, now your defense is getting steamrolled. 3 and out again, steamrolled again, and to where, everything matters. We always talk about the rush and the coverage because Sean McDermott's talking about that. It's special teams and field position. It's, a long return where the Bills defense only gives up 2 first downs on one drive, but the Ravens still get 3 points because they return the ball to the 45-yard line. And so everything works in unison, whether it's calls or turnovers or whatever it may be. And credit the Bills. They didn't have any turnovers in this one. And so they really didn't shoot themselves in the foot offensively, other than those early 3-and-outs, especially against a team like the Ravens, just can't happen, especially when you get to a 2nd-and-1.
Right.
Keon Coleman drops his first target of the game, but in the second half, 9 targets, 7 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. The guy was playing like the man-child we saw in training camp and in the joint practices against the Bears. Certainly a heck of a debut in a game where they absolutely needed him.
Absolutely. And this is the guy they hoped he would be when they drafted him. And, he came in with high expectations last year because he was the first player we took, but he was a 2nd-round receiver. And he played well at times last year, had the injury, didn't come back as strong off of it. And then he came back focused this offseason, and we're seeing the fruits of it. And honestly, I was ecstatic the way he bounced back off of that early drop. I mean, you could hear the grumblings in the crowd when he dropped that early screen pass, and everyone's moaning, oh gosh, here we go again, he's not going to be as big of a factor as we hoped he'd be. And then at times he was flat out dominant. He showed his physicality, drawing flags, or maybe should have been drawing flags at time, with how aggressive these DBs got to be against him because of his stature at 6'4", 215. And then late in the game, Josh recognizes we're at the 35-yard line now. They got to blitz me. Orr's got to send pressure here to try and get us back out of field goal range. Checks the protection, checks the route, and Keon's the guy he goes to. And so that says a lot in that moment, that Keon is the dude that Josh trusts in those big moments. And thank you, Jair Alexander, for tackling Keon, or else it would have been the call when I was talking over, I believe it was Murph, when Micah Hyde was running back that onside kick going, no, no. And, go down in that instance. And I almost thought the Bills should have ran it, maybe got a little bit closer, but not try and score in those instances. But kicker like Prater, you're not worried about an extra 5-6 yards, I guess.
Yeah, and this game as well, when you get down to the nitty-gritties of it, what did you think about the Bills? You mentioned a couple of 3-and-outs early in the first half or after that first drive. It felt to me like the Ravens were inviting the Bills to play a little small ball, like Josh was not being able to push the ball down the field at all. Obviously, the run game is going to continue to be a part of it, but it always looks conservative when it doesn't play out. Then in the second half, it looked like they said, okay, and they took the lid off it a little bit. What did you think of how the offense played overall? I know that they scored 41 points, and then, it was awesome, but they had to score 22 in the fourth quarter. So,
yeah,
what took them so long?
Yeah, they had an awesome first drive of the game, and then you have your first play of the second possession. Like I said earlier, they get to a 2nd-and-1, and similar to the first drive, they got to a 2nd-and-1, and then they just ran the ball to pick up another first down, and they tried to do that again, and they got stuffed. And those 3-and-outs were an issue, and I'm with you. We weren't pressing the ball down the field, and without looking back at the film yet, it's hard to say, is that because of safety rotations or the coverage or other things they liked. But there was times last night where it appeared that Orr was confusing Josh, getting pressure on him, and just not making him feel comfortable out there to make those throws down the field. And there was a couple of tries Josh took down the field. The one early in the game, Shakir, missed Palmer later in the game, where he's kind of selling those, 2nd to 3rd level throws down the field. Sometimes that comes with, a Shakir hasn't been getting a lot of reps. It's his first game with Palmer, but ultimately this offense has the potential to be the best in the NFL, and we saw it. We saw that on full display in the second half, and what they were able to do when they said, look, we're in desperation mode. Josh, take this thing over. Well, now you have a great offensive line, top 5 offensive line in football, and where you might say that, or most would say that the Bills don't have top-end talent around Josh Allen. They have a ton of weapons with different skill sets. They have 2 great tight ends, and the 3rd blocking tight end makes a big play for Josh. The running backs all got involved. Cook got involved catching the ball out of the backfield, and a majority of the receivers got involved last night. And so to me, it's one of those things where, yes, maybe none of the Bills' skill position players other than Josh Allen is your fantasy darling this year, maybe James Cook. But I like Keon Coleman to have some big-time explosion games similar to last night. Give me Kincaid to have a big season and be a move-the-chain guy like we saw last night. Shakir's going to get his touches. And then Palmer as well. I mean, they got guys that individually could have a big game any Sunday.
Yeah. Let's flip it over to the defensive side of the ball. And while Ed Oliver had a night, and Bosa and Rousseau were factors in the pass rush, the bottom line is some of the same problems reared their ugly heads that the Bills experienced last year on the defensive side of the ball. The Ravens are almost 55% on third down conversion. They have trouble getting Lamar on the ground with any degree of efficiency, let alone speeding up his internal clock. And Derrick Henry, ran wild. And look, we're taking this with a grain of salt because the Baltimore offense is a machine, and they're going to steamroll a lot of other teams in this league through the course of this regular season, Eric. But what concerns you most about the defensive performance, especially with all these big plays? They had 10 of 15 yards or more, the Ravens did.
Yeah, it was the chunk plays. One of my keys to the game was to just make them earn it all the way down the field. They're going to make their plays just like the Bills do with, two of the three top scoring offenses in the league last year and so much continuity back. Both these teams have almost their entire offense back from a year ago. So you expect, and offensive coordinators back. So you expect them to pick up pretty strong in week one. The biggest concern for me is the big plays in the run game and the pass game. They were just coming in chunks. And that's a concern. I mean, it truly is. Now, you have two safeties that missed a lot of time during training camp. You have a 5th, 6th round rookie cornerback starting in replacement of Tre'Davious White and your first rounder that's hurt. You got two rookies that you're relying on playing significant snaps in the middle at defensive tackle. And, you could talk about all that, but there was definitely concerns last night. Now, talk about the positives. Joey Bosa and Greg Rousseau look like they're going to be a tough duo off the edge when it comes to obvious pass situations. That's something that we've been looking for, and this is a pretty good Ravens offensive line. And you also have the fact that you're halfway contained rushing because it's Lamar Jackson back there. Encouraged by that, Ed Oliver looked incredible last night. I thought Bernard and Milano at times had nice plays. Never a concern about Taron Johnson, Christian Benford. And so, all that being said, yes, there's concerns heading into this next week, especially when you look at this Jets team that ran the ball for over 180 yards last week against the Steelers. You're saying, okay, well, what are we going to look like this week? Was this an anomaly? Was this just the Ravens? Was this week one, everyone getting their feet back under them? Or is this going to be a theme throughout the year? And that's what we got to see this week. And, some of it's the Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson effect, I'm sure. But then this week you have Breece Hall and Braylon Allen and Justin Fields, who's no Lamar Jackson, but you're going to get, I guess, a similar test this week with a mobile quarterback, a couple of good running backs, and they're going to test you in very similar ways. This is a copycat league, and the Jets are sitting there this week saying, let's see if they can fix their issues in 1 week.
And what should we look for? I mean, this obviously, and I was mentioning this to Brownie on the air, the Jets watch this game too, right? How much will you see them coming out and running some of the same kind of concepts that the Ravens did with a difference? And Breece Hall's not Derrick Henry, but he's very fast. I mean, they're going to use that against the Bills. What can the Bills defense expect from this Jet team that's going to be different than what they showed against Pittsburgh?
They're likely going to copy some of their concepts,
Yeah.
whether it's the wham concepts where someone motions or a tight end blocks back across the formation to create a seal. They're going to test them on the toss cracks that we saw yesterday. Once you get bunched up inside, okay, can you then protect the edge on the toss cracks? We saw a long Derrick Henry touchdown run there. Likely a fullback in the game. We saw the backup tight end for Baltimore play some fullback yesterday, and fullbacks are kind of a dying breed in the NFL. But the Bills are going to see all this again because they're going to see if they can be gap sound this week. And when it's gap sound, sometimes that means, guys got to fill in the right spots and they got to take good angles. And we didn't see that at all times yesterday. It also means guys got to win up front, or you got to chew up a double team and then someone's got to make a play off the top of it. And so, look, if it was one thing we could point our finger at for giving up over 200 yards rushing yesterday, we would do it. Problem is, when you give up that much, it's a culmination of things. It's not being sound in your gaps. It's guys getting manhandled up front at times. And then, you got a guy like Lamar Jackson, and sometimes, a guy like Bosa makes the right read and just gets out-athleted on the edge, which is going to happen.
Yeah. Eric, thanks for the time. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you, obviously, and I'll see you in New Jersey.
Yep, sounds good. Have a great week, guys.